maybe you can help me, inspire me, because I'm always puzzled by this idea that why I should be doing that if I already know a YouTube video of someone who does the same stuff 10 times better than I do. It's like I can take this video and maybe take some thoughts from it, create something, but overall I think this person did a lot better job. And then why should I go through the script, record it, and so on, instead of just saying, go watch this 10-minute video on YouTube? It's actually spot on.
So it's a good question, and I probably referred to a lot of those kinds of videos when I was making my own ones. Like it's not like you're saying I'm the only one who can give you this content, right? That would be really silly. So when you're talking about anything, it's like what would I recommend you look at next? And this is just maybe for someone who hasn't done any kind of training like this before, and like obviously it's a stepping stone to the stuff that you should really read about, right? But the angle I took was I've been in this organization for long enough to have a few stories and to be able to tell you what I think it is here,
Yeah.
and point you towards the things that helped me here, which is different from the generic training online, which says it doesn't really give context specific or context. It's like the it depends thing. Like, what should agile training look like? It's like, well, it depends. Like, what does your organization need? What are you kind of interested in? What do you, as an engineer or as a product person, like what are your kind of challenges in the organization? It's like, oh, well, dependencies. It's like, okay, great. Let's talk about dependencies then.
Yeah.
As opposed to like the Agile Manifesto was written in 2001. That's boring. And you can go online and get that stuff.
And this is exactly the type of stuff that you can automate by asking AI to talk about it. And it's actually a great point. I think that the more of the specific context you add to this, the better it becomes. It's also the hardest thing to do, in the sense that it's easy to say, you should be following Agile Manifesto. There are 4 points here. Point number 1, 2, 3, 4, and it makes so much sense because blah blah blah, blah. But then some things don't really work this way in this organization. And how do you connect that and give people some sound, I don't even know, advice or some ideas of what might be more on the try more of that, try less of that type of thing. And this is actually very difficult because what I've noticed, the less experience you have, the more likely you are to just take good advice that is out there and keep talking about this good advice. I read this awesome book about avoiding the build trap. So let me now talk to you what Melissa Perry is talking about. And cool, I can listen to Melissa Perry talking about it instead of someone talking about what she talks about. Tell me, how do we apply this in our context? Did someone try? Did someone fail? Did someone succeed? What's specific to us, rather than it's a great idea.
So I think where you could bring in another idea there is you're I think starting to think about outcomes, right? Learning outcomes. So what is it that people need from this thing that you're making? And it was helpful for us in a previous organization to think of, is it someone day one in the organization? So think of a continuum of time spent in the same organization that you're in. Is it day one? Is it onboarding, so the first few months? Is it getting up to speed in a role? Or is it developing and progressing in a role? And your Melissa Perry oriented Escaping the Build Trap video could be different depending on
Yeah.
that audience and that learning objective, you know. So we had day one agile, which was very introductory. Here's what it means here. You know, we got things like the frameworks we use and how they were applied. Here's examples of each of the, you know, values and principles that we're talking about. Here's what we think we're doing well, and here's what has evolved, and here's what has adapted over time. So this is what the framework says. This is how we do it. You might think that's wrong, that we're not following the framework exactly, but here's why it evolved that way. And actually we think adapting and moving on is good. You know, so trying to explain, walk in the talk a little bit by explaining live examples. But for someone advancing in a product manager role, you know, that's harder. That's harder. So you might want to do what we're doing here and have a conversation recorded with another product manager or two and say,
Yeah.
okay, guys, let's talk about how, you know, escaping the build trap has been applied in our organization. Go. What do you think? And you might have somebody who's a real evangelist and someone who's a bit more skeptical to make it interesting. And I think that to me, you know, I would like to hear that kind of conversation, if it was candid and not, you know, a veneered version of the truth. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah. It's actually it's great that that you mentioned it. It's something that we did in the past, and I just realized now, which was uh, in the organization there was some idea that executives wanted to implement, and there was a community of practice meeting where this idea was discussed, and a lot of people were, you know, challenging it, and part 10 minutes of the recording of this conversation was something that we used when onboarding new people in agile ways of working, because I found it super interesting. You know, you get to hear it from the actual executive of the company saying
Mm,
that this is what we want to do, and then people asking like, all right, but what do you mean by this, or how would we apply it here? And this conversation was just very good. uh, I'm also thinking of another angle to it, and I'm wondering what is your opinion, which is it's you doing the the talk or the recording, and then it's also about being having a person that you can reach out to in the organization,
mm.
and connect to a real person rather than having, I don't know, Jeff Patton talking about output, outcome, impact, because probably you won't reach out to him or he won't have time for you. But hey, here's an agile coach in the organization, and I did this onboarding, and I imagine you would be quite happy if someone actually reaches out and asks questions. You know, that's like yeah. What do you think?
And I think also that's one way to gauge whether the thing you're putting out there is effective, right? And for me, that's what I was talking about with getting to the outcomes of, like, your goal isn't training delivery, right? That's the output. You're enabled to deliver training. That's the output. But the outcome is, it was interesting. People got something from it. How do you measure that stuff? So for me, it's important to put it somewhere that you can keep an eye on those things. There's a way to measure engagement and interaction, and people reaching out and making contact to have a conversation is that's brilliant outcome. But in the first instance, I think it's, you know, the Dave McClure idea, the awareness, acquisition. I'm not going to remember all five of them: referrals and retention. So, is there some way to measure whether people are commenting or recommending or, you know, watching it until the end? You know, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, connecting to a real person. I think the other thing you won't get from automated or online sources is the stories, you know, that's important because that's what connects people to it. So if you can tell your story, like, here's what I did to put this into practice, and here's how it worked for me, and here's what I learned, I think people can relate to that a lot more than, the theory. uh, but yeah, stories and conversations, I did ask an AI tool once, what would make my content different from AI generated content, and it was surprisingly aware of the things that it couldn't do. But yeah, personal stories, conversations. So far as I know, I think people are still better at that stuff.
Yeah.